Hello, everyone. I'm Raymond Bakari, and welcome to our CD1 Democratic Primary Virtual Forum. This is the first of two sessions for this forum due to the number of candidates running and participating in both sessions of the forum. The session lineups were decided as randomly as possible. We have 6 candidates in this session: Mr. Walter Berbrick, State Senator Sandra Cano, Mr. Donald Carlson, State Representative Stephen Casey, former State Representative Aaron Regunberg, and Mr. Alan Waters. The moderators will be myself, and to the left of me on my screen, Ryan Lukowicz. We've done debates before. The previous one will be linked in the description, Senate District 35. There was no specific criteria as for who can participate in this forum other than just getting the 500 signatures to qualify for the ballot. We're going to keep answers to base questions to around a minute to a minute and a half to make sure we can get through as many topics as possible. Follow-ups will be more brief and on a case-by-case basis, depending on what Ryan and I are hearing. We want this forum to remain as civil as possible since we're on Zoom and there's, bandwidth and, if someone's muted or not, to try to keep yourself muted when someone else is talking. However, if there is a direct attack from one candidate to another, Ryan and I will give time for rebuttals so each candidate can get a fair shot to respond if needed. Each candidate will also get a 1-minute closing statement. We're going to omit the opening statements instead for our first question, which Ryan will start things off with.
Thank you, Raymond, and hello, everyone. Thank you for being here, and great job setting the table, Ray. So my first question is going to be, we're starting with Mr. Berbrick, by the way, and going in alphabetical order by last name for the first question, and then we'll start with the second person, third person. It'll keep going. I think you'll get the gist of it as we go along. But the question is going to be, and you have 60 seconds to answer this, again, in place of an opening statement. This is more of an opening question, but what differentiates you in this crowded field to represent the residents of Rhode Island from the 1st Congressional District in the House of Representatives, and why are you the best candidate to represent the district? And we'll start with Mr. Berbrick.
Well, thanks, Raymond, Ryan. Appreciate you both, and welcome. Unfortunately, we don't have folks here live, but I look forward to the responses afterwards. And a shout out to my colleagues and folks here on the line as well. As a father, as a husband, I'm the only candidate in this race who has spent their life's work, nearly 2 decades, serving and delivering real results for our country and for our community, for Americans and for all Rhode Islanders. And that goes from the local level to the global level. As a community volunteer leader with the American Red Cross, helping Rhode Islanders in times of need, as an intelligence officer for the last 10 years in the Navy, helping keep Americans safe from violent extremism, and as a civil servant at the Naval War College, at the State Department, at the Pentagon, protecting Americans from threats from authoritarian governments, threats from militaries, but also threats from climate change.
Okay, thank you. We will now go on to Ms. Cano.
Thank you for having me, Raymond and Ryan. You guys are doing an amazing job of informing the community. So my name is Sandra Cano. I'm a state senator from District 8 in Pawtucket, but I'm the only candidate in this election that have actually served all different levels of government, starting from the school committee, going through the city council, and then now as a state senator and the first Latina chair of the education committee, doing legislation that works for people. I'm very passionate about helping people, and that is why I'm running for Congress. I will always carry with me the voices of my community and advocate on behalf of working people, because my lived experiences have shaped my values and my vision as a policymaker and a democratic policymaker. I want to make sure that all of those policies and experiences in the public service and also in the private sector as a former banker is transferred to the Congress, and making sure that all Rhode Islanders have the opportunity to have an advocate that cares for them.
Thank you. Mr. Carlson.
Nice to see all my colleagues for the first time in a debate, and thank you for having us here, Ray. I really appreciate it. It's a wonder to see you guys, and I hope this is the first of many conversations as we begin to engage with each other. So I'm an outsider to politics. I'm pretty new to this kind of world. I've been involved in a lot of campaigns, but the first time I've run for office in Rhode Island, so I have an extra burden of needing to introduce myself. But I did grow up in Rhode Island. I started my life in a 2-family tenement house in Providence on 7th Street in the shadow of the old Rhode Island Auditorium, and grew up here. And my first job was at the Newport Creamery. It's been a long way since then. I'm actually the only candidate in this race with significant experience in the private sector and actually doing business. And I think that's a really important thing here in Rhode Island, because a lot of our problems that we have in the state need help from the private sector. We need to have the government set the ground rules and create incentives and work in partnership with the private sector to develop solutions to a lot of the problems that we have. And that's something that I can uniquely bring to the table, given my history in business and in finance and in banking and lots of other stuff. But I also serve here in my local town, in Jamestown, as an EMT. So there's a public service dimension to that as well. And I'm the only candidate who's actually worked in the job that we're running for. I've worked in the House of Representatives for 2 separate members of Congress, Jim Himes in Fairfield County and Joseph Kennedy from Massachusetts back in the 1990s, the Joseph Kennedy II, and had a lot of experience in understanding how the House works. So I think I'm the guy who can hit the ground running and get the job done for Rhode Island from day one.
Mr. Casey?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone. It's nice to see everybody here. So regarding my experience, I'm a 17-year veteran of the Woonsocket Fire Department, and I'm an 11-year member here at the House of Representatives. I believe my experience here as a House chairman of 3 committees in the past, but most importantly during the pandemic with the Health and Human Services Committee, and now with the housing pandemic, the chairman of the Municipal Government and Housing Committee. I think we've done some really good work up here. I also have experience prior to becoming a fireman at the age of 38. I had 23 years of experience in financial services operations and sales. I managed up to 450 people at any one time. So I have the business background and the acumen. And I think what sets me apart from that is that I do have the support of the business community and the support of some of the unions, which really makes a little bit of a difference here, where I can see things from a 50,000-foot view and how things affect people from Rhode Island. More importantly, I've been in everybody's house figuratively as a rescue guy. I see how people live. I see how Rhode Islanders have struggled, and I understand the importance of government's role in trying to help people overcome the issues that they face. So I'd like to thank you guys all for having me here. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Regunberg?
Well, hi, thanks Raymond and Ryan for having us. My name is Aaron Regunberg, and I'm proud to be running on the strongest progressive platform and progressive record in this race. That's why our campaign's been endorsed by organizations like Working Families Party and Progressive Democrats of America and Our Revolution, the org Bernie Sanders founded, and by local and national progressive leaders, folks like Congressman Jamie Raskin and Congressman Ro Khanna. These are folks that know that I've got a record of working to take on big pharma and health insurance executives to try to push for Medicare for all. They know I have a record of standing up and fighting big oil to try to win real climate action. And I know these are not easy fights. It's not easy to take on these kinds of entrenched interests, but I also know that when Rhode Islanders come together, we can take on those interests and win. And I know that because we've seen it in our state. I've been a part of winning real concrete policy change, including in cases when people didn't think it was going to be possible, when we passed paid sick days to make sure that 40% of Rhode Island workers who couldn't before could start caring for a loved one or recovering from an illness without having to worry about losing their pay, or increasing the minimum wage for tip workers for the first time in 20 years in our state, or creating new clean energy programs, or expanding harm reduction strategies. These were not easy fights, but we were able to bring folks together and build coalitions and get it done. And that's the kind of work I think we need to be doing in Washington right now. That's the kind of work I've been doing in Rhode Island for many years, and I'd be so honored to be able to contribute to those fights in Washington on behalf of our communities.
Mr. Waters?
So glad to be here today. I'm Alan Waters. I'm a 67-year-old candidate, probably one of the oldest, collect my Social Security, et cetera. I worked a career in financial services, companies like Merrill Lynch, Charles Schwab, TI Kraft. So I have a basic understanding about how the economy grows, and we want to be able to do that. I'm a father of 5 children from 16 to 46. So I've seen the span of what has gone on in education myself. I'm a K through 12 graduate of Providence Public Schools, fourth generation resident native of Providence. And I also, one of the things that drives me is that our nation is in trouble. It's polarized. And there's just so many people in my neighborhood, the West End neighborhood of Providence, where the American dream isn't being fulfilled. And I want to make a difference for people throughout the district, as well as the people in the community for which I grew up in.
Thank you all for your responses to that opening question. I will now turn it back over to Raymond for our first topic, which will be gun violence.
Thank you, Ryan. Starting off with the base question, the issue of addressing gun violence is one of several top issues on voters' minds in the district heading into the special election. I'm going to start with Senator Cano with the first question. If elected to Congress, what measures would you support to reduce gun violence, and how would you get it done in a GOP-led House?
Thank you for the question. I have been personally affected by gun violence. I came to this country under political asylum because my dad got kidnapped in Colombia. So I know how difficult it is for families to really understand the effects of gun violence in our communities. And right now we have a nation that is in the midst of multiple interlocked crises, significant wars, but the access of firearms. So I would be, just like I have been at the state legislature, I will be an advocate to make sure we pass the safest gun laws that we can have in the nation. Just like I have voted already and have a record of voting here in Rhode Island as a state legislator, I will do at the national level. I am for a assault weapon ban. I think that we need to do that right now. As a mother, I feel the fear of married parents sending the kids to school when it should be havens of safe spaces for them. I also fear for the people that are not able to celebrate a parade or any public spaces without that fear of having massacres in our country. So I will continue to be an advocate with passion because I have the lived experience, I understand the suffering, and I have already done the work as a state legislator, and I want to transfer that passion to the national level and make gun safety laws that really work for all Americans, so everybody have the opportunity to enjoy their places of live and work, and they have a safe place. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Cano. Next up for that same question, if elected to Congress, what measures would you support to reduce gun violence, and how would you get it done in a GOP-led House? Mr. Carlson?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to answer this one. Definitely the assault weapons ban. I'm really proud that David Cicilline was the primary sponsor of that in the House, and happy to pick up his legacy in pursuing that forward. I think that's the first and most necessary step. When Australia did that, 26 years ago, they actually haven't had a mass shooting since. So it's a pretty remarkable experience, and there's data to support it. It also worked in this country for 10 years. In 1994, President Clinton enacted assault weapons ban, and it significantly reduced the amount of mass violence from guns. So it's a really important step to take. Like Sandra, I've had personal experience with this. Just as this campaign was getting underway in March, my daughter Ella was involved in an active shooter situation at Colby College where two kids got into a fight. One pulled a pistol and started shooting in a crowded party. And they were in lockdown all night in an active shooter situation. And no parent ought to get that text in the middle of the night. It was a tough time for her and a tough time for our whole family. And we need to put an end to that stuff and put an end to it once and for all. I do have a comment though on the assault weapons ban because we have an overwhelmingly Democratic legislature in this state, and there was a bill up for consideration this year, and that bill failed, and it didn't come up for a vote. We have two representatives here, one from the Senate, one from the House, and it would be interesting to hear why didn't they push for that to come up for a vote in an overwhelmingly Democratic caucus, and how could you possibly get it done in Washington if you couldn't get it done in the context of Rhode Island, where the Democrats have such an overwhelming edge, a supermajority edge.
Okay, that did sound like a direct attack. So, Senator,
not an attack, just a question.
Well, a direct question. My apologies, Ms. Cano. I'll let you go first, and then I did have Mr. Casey up next on the order, regardless. So, Ms. Cano, I'll give you a brief response, and Mr. Casey, when you get to answer the base question, I'll give you like the similar time to insert the rebut. All right, go ahead, Ms. Cano.
Thank you, Ray. Actually, I had been a leading co-sponsor of that legislation, and I have stood up with Men's Demands and Rhode Island Coalition Against Gun Violence all the way until advocating and making sure that our leadership knows the importance of passing that legislation. So it hasn't been for lack of effort or lack of making sure that we do the right thing for Rhode Islanders. I do believe that it takes collective action, and so it is not the responsibility of only one legislator to do this. But I do know that I have built those coalitions, and I had already been able to cast the votes to pass the safest laws in Rhode Island with other of the votes that I have taken in previous legislations. And I will not stop until we'll do an assault ban in Rhode Island, and I will pledge to do that, even if I am in Congress or if I am in the Senate. But I will do that.
Let's get the House of Representatives perspective here on the state level. Mr. Casey, I'll ask you the base question, and you can also feel free if you want to respond to Mr. Carlson and your remarks. So the question is, what measures would you support to reduce gun violence, and how would you get it done in a GOP-led House?
Well, at this point, in 2022, if we've all done our research, the President Biden passed the Safer Communities Act, which really is a focus on expanding mental health services, providing additional support for states and to enhance the initiatives that promote safer, more inclusive and protective, positive school environments for children. And I think that that's the beginning of what needs to be done. I think the majority of the issues that we have with gun violence when it comes to school shootings is based upon mental health issues. And we need to really promote a safer opportunity for children. All these things, I believe, start with school bullying. And if you're talking about an adult who has, committed some type of an act of violence on a school, we certainly have a mental health issue. People who are not mentally affected do not run into a school and try to kill people and shoot children. I think part of the I've spoken with kids here in Woonsocket in my own district, talked about safety measures that we take. They'd really like to see more resource officers, and that was my answer to some of the gun legislation that we've had in the past. And I don't really care who pays for them, but if we want safer kids, we need to have the opportunity to protect them, and we need to have more resource officers in schools to prevent any type of invasion of the school grounds. Like I said, and part of that is an educational process. Regarding the what they call the assault weapons ban legislation here in Rhode Island, I think part of the legislation, it wasn't properly phrased and termed. When you're talking about an assault weapons ban, there is a federal ban on what we call a machine gun, which is an automatic weapon. In order to own an automatic weapon or possess an automatic weapon or to sell an automatic weapon, you need to have an FFL, which is a federal firearms license. What we're talking about is a firearm that just looks a little bit scary. It's actually the same type of an operation as a regular hand pistol. And if there's an issue with that, it looks ugly, but it's the same operation. So we need to really take a look at how we're phrasing and what we're doing. My concern is that what happens is that we need to create a situation and we need to create legislation that takes care of street violence and gun violence on the streets, which is the majority of that happens with illegally owned or illegally obtained firearms. So we need to really concentrate on what's causing the problem in the streets and not affect law-abiding citizens at home.
I just want to do a brief follow-up, Mr. Casey. So in terms of the big ticket items like a national assault weapons ban, you wouldn't vote in favor of that? From what it sounds like,
if the legislation is crafted properly and we're talking about machine guns and those type of things, absolutely. Anything to make the world safer. But when we're talking about making law-abiding citizens criminals overnight because they own a certain type of firearms, then we need to really look at that legislation and talk about how we're going to create a safer school system and a safer community.
All right.
Regarding illegal firearms.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Casey. I'm going to tie in Mr. Regunberg. Base question, if elected to Congress, what measures would you support to reduce gun violence and how would you get it done in the GOP-led House?
Well, there's nothing wrong with the wording of the assault weapons ban legislation. That's legislation that I worked on. We're talking about getting military-style weapons off of our streets, and the failure of our political leadership to take action to stop these senseless tragedies that we're seeing again and again is obscene. And it's obscene at the national level. And as Don mentioned, it's obscene at the state level when we have legislative leadership, the Senate leadership in particular this year, blocking the assault weapons ban. We need to ask questions about that. And we need to remember that these tragedies that we are seeing are not accidents. It is not an accident that more kids die from gun violence in this country than anywhere else on the planet. The gun industry is making billions and billions of dollars off of this crisis. And that is why they are feeding it. And then they are using some of that money to invest in advocacy orgs like the NRA and others to block any common sense action. The answer for how we respond to that, how we overcome those entrenched interests, like on so many issues, is organizing. And we have seen that again in Rhode Island. I was proud every year that I was in the legislature, I introduced the high capacity magazine ban bill. And I was so grateful that that finally passed recently. And the reason it passed was organizing by volunteers, by folks with Moms Demand Action and the Coalition Against Gun Violence, people who are willing to put so much of their time and energy into this work. And it shouldn't take so much work to do such common sense measures, but it does. And what we need to be doing in Washington is building out that organizing, taking it to scale, and naming the enemies. Because again, there are entrenched interests that are benefiting off of the violence against children that we are seeing in this country. And we need to call that out for what it is.
Mr. Waters.
Mr. Regunberg, can I just ask a quick follow-up? I know Mr. Carlson did not point you out by name, but you were also, as you mentioned, in the legislature for 4 years. And a lot of this gun legislation passed after you were done. I know the assault weapons ban hasn't gotten done yet, but we had a lot of bills last year about high capacity magazines and safe storage, among others. Is there a reason you didn't get that done while you were up at the State House?
Well, the safe storage bill should have passed this year. It didn't. I'm very proud of the work that we did to start building the movement that has had success. When I was first elected, you know, you can kind of get a sense of the balance of power on these issues. On gun day, that's when the day that all the bills are scheduled for a hearing, based on the colors of shirts that you see in the crowd. And folks who have been at the State House know all the folks that are trying to stop common sense gun violence prevention measures come up wearing yellow shirts, and the folks who are organizing for these measures come up with red and orange shirts, the Moms Demand Action, the Coalition Against Gun Violence. And when I was first up there, it was a sea of yellow shirts. And it was, honestly, it was a little intimidating and scary to be putting in, you know, a bill like the high capacity magazine ban and be looking out at that sea. But again, over the years, folks have come together and organized and put so much of their time and energy into the work. And that is how we win change on every issue.
I'm just gonna stop you there, Mr. Regunberg, so we can give Mr. Waters a chance to get in on this conversation. So, Mr. Waters, the question is: if elected to Congress, what measures would you support to reduce gun violence, and how would you get it done in the GOP-led House?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that I fully support the Second Amendment and our God-given right to protect ourselves as backed by the Constitution. I have a license to carry a firearm in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, and I believe whether you're conservative or liberal, especially for women and other people, that they should have access to a firearm to be able to protect themselves if that's what they wish to do. As far as legislation in the federal government, assault rifles are already banned. We're talking about Armalite rifle style, semi-automatic rifles, and the answer is those should not be taken away. So I will not vote to take semi-automatic rifles away from the public. We already have a rigorous. I had to go through federal background checks to get my license. We already have that. But what we do have is a psychological and a morals problem in America. And in schools, not only should we protect children, but we should have part of a curriculum should be things such as philosophy, talking about critical thinking, and things such as we need to be able to talk about natural law, which is taking away religion, but we need to be talking about the things such as the right things to do that are embedded in everyone. We have gotten away from those things, and I live in a neighborhood where I could take you and visit every shrine to a dead young man, and it's pretty sad. But that said, we have our rights, and we need to keep them.
I do just want to do a quick follow-up and then we'll tie Mr. Berbrick in and then we'll move on from the gun violence topic. So Mr. Waters, it seems like you're against the national assault weapons ban. And as Mr. Carlson mentioned, the previous congressman, David Cicilline, was the lead sponsor of the national assault weapons ban. And the district is fairly blue and fairly progressive. So there's no doubt that there's going to be voters voting in this election that have an appetite for those big ticket items. So just a quick follow-up, how would those factors play into your philosophy on this issue?
Well, the answer is the public needs to know that the last assault weapon ban, the federal government said that it really didn't work. Part two, by far, handguns, from 4-to-1, 3-to-1, do the most murders in America. So what we're doing is going down a false road, and I don't want to be part of that.
Mr. Berbrick, we're going to tie you in, last person for the topic, and then we'll move on. If elected to Congress, what measures would you support to reduce gun violence, and how would you get it done in the GOP-led House?
Thanks, Raymond. Gun violence is a national crisis. More kids die from gun violence each and every day than anything in our country. And, I believe it's because of failed leadership in Washington and failed leaders right here in Rhode Island. I mean, I've had personal friends, very close personal friends of mine, die at a very early age because of senseless acts of gun violence. And, as the father of 2 school-age children, I constantly think about whether or not my kids are going to come home safe. I've had so many conversations with parents across our district who feel the same, who feel the same way. And no kid and no parent should ever feel that way. And so, and as a Navy veteran, I understand the responsibilities and the obligations that come with handling assault weapons. And I also have seen the impacts that these weapons have on our battlefields. And so, we were fortunate enough to receive the Moms Demand Action distinction. And for me, this is a very personal issue. So I'm going to work tirelessly in Congress to do a few things. Number one, close gun loopholes, to have more stringent background investigations, background checks, and to invest in research. But the biggest thing, and it's been brought up already, is once and for all ban assault weapons and high capacity magazines, because I believe weapons of war belong on our battlefield and not on our streets.
Okay, I think that's a good place to end things for this topic. We're going to move on to our next topic, which Ryan will take over, and that is the topic of reproductive rights.
Thank you, Raymond, and thank you to the candidates for those thoughtful answers. The next topic is relating to reproductive rights and everything related to women's health care and abortions. The base question is, to what extent in a pregnancy do you support having an abortion, and how do you plan to compromise this position potentially in a GOP-led House? So for this question, we are going to be starting with Mr. Carlson.
Yeah, thank you. On some issues, I think it's really important to find common ground with the other side. This isn't one of them. This is an issue of principle. And this is really about the autonomy of women to have control over decisions relating to their own bodies. So this is one on which I'm going to stand firm. And we really have to stand firm, because for a long time in this country, we had a recognized right to privacy. And one of the elements of that was the right to have control over decisions relating to terminating a pregnancy. And as the father of 2 daughters, I want my daughters to have that control over their bodies. I do not want the government in the hospital room telling them what to do or telling their doctor what to do. And they should have that control, and I respect their judgment. I think they will make wise and mature decisions because I think they were brought up well and have great values. And so I want to stand by them and say that I'm going to fight to the last breath to make sure that that right gets protected and maintained and not compromise on that right. The Supreme Court has gone rogue, and they've done a terrible job of undermining some basic fundamental rights that have to do with our individual liberty, the right to privacy in particular. I teach at Yale Law School now, and that's one of the rights that we've really talked about for a long time and have maintained very, very strongly. But undoing that would undo a lot of other things, like, for example, gay marriage, even the right to have birth control. If we undo those rights to privacy and we say they're no longer protected by the Constitution, there's no telling where that will end. So I'm going to stand firm on this one. No compromise.
Okay, so that means you would vote only for a bill that basically says that anyone can have an abortion at any time during a pregnancy. Is that the conclusion?
I think what we should do is use the standard that was established by Roe versus Wade. That was a common sense standard that worked for a really long time, for 50 years, and eliminated a lot of suffering in our country. Anybody who was around before then would tell you that there was a lot of backroom abortions and coat hangers and all kinds of potions and things that people used when they were desperate. And they were liberated from having to resort to those terrible, tragic ends when Roe versus Wade was decided. It was a very workable solution for a long time, and that's what we should maintain.
Thank you. Mr. Casey, same question.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to unmute myself.
Oh, no worries.
Yes, so I was born and raised Catholic. I'm an altar boy and Eagle Scout, and I've spent 17 years as an EMT and a firefighter in the city of Woonsocket. My position on abortion is I am personally against abortion due to my religious beliefs. And you know, I have actually had the opportunity, unfortunately, to have emergency situations and give birth to premature babies in the back of a rescue to help and assist in delivery. You know, those babies don't come out, they come out gasping for air, and they want to live. So, you know, I have an extreme issue with anything regarding late-term abortions. I also have a cousin that gave birth to at 25 weeks premature baby. Now, that baby Bridget has, you know, struggled throughout her life. She's now 2 years old, fought for her own life, and now she's 2 years old off oxygen and is a normal human being. So I have a major issue with abortion rights. However, I am not a woman, and I cannot make that decision for a woman. As you know, as far as my stance on other things, I'm a constitutionalist, and I believe in the right for everyone to live the way they need to live. And I believe that government should be out of your doctor's office and out of your bedroom and out of your gun closet. So that's
what kind of legislation would you vote for on this topic? Can we apply some of that?
I think much like Mr. Carlson, the Roe versus Wade decision has been protective for years now, and I think I could stand with that legislation.
Okay, so you would agree with that. Okay, thank you for that answer. Up next, we go to Mr. Regunberg.
The right to and access to abortion services is a fundamental human right, and it is one that, until that is protected and given meaning through real access, we're not going to have racial justice. We're not going to have economic justice. We're not going to have immigration justice. We're not going to have climate justice. Reproductive justice is essential to all of these things. And we know what we need to do, right? We need to codify Roe v. Wade. We need to reform our courts so that we can't have right-wing judicial activists getting in the way of a decision that should be between a woman and her family and her doctor.
We'll get to the court in our rapid fire section, I promise. Could we try to nail down your position a little bit more? Would you say no compromise on this, similar to Mr. Carlson, and only vote for the previous Roe v. Wade legislation that was established?
Absolutely. And it's not just about voting. Like, the Democratic Party needs to have a real strategy for how we get there, because how we are here now is because the Republican Party had a real strategy. In the 70s, when Roe v. Wade passed, conservative activists got together and they mapped out a decades-long strategy of how they were going to use minoritarian structures and channels, because they know that they do not have a majority on this. Most people support a woman's right to choose. And they were going to take over the court, and they were going to create an inane judicial philosophy and implement it. And they were going to take over state legislatures and use gerrymandering to not have to worry about Democratic majorities to pass more and more radical abortion bans. And they were going to make it untenable for any Republican to be successful in the GOP unless they were rabidly anti-choice. And Democrats, I think, have too often not said we need to take the same life or death approach to these issues. It needs to be untenable for someone to be in the Democratic Party if they do not support a woman's right to choose, in the same way that the Republican Party has made it. And we need to understand that this is not going to work itself out. We need to act with urgency and dedication, and perhaps a degree of ruthlessness in the way that Republicans have, if we're actually going to secure reproductive rights for women in this country.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Regunberg. Mr. Waters, same question. Let's tie you in on this.
I'm personally pro-life. I believe that the decision is a constitutional decision, that the federal government does not protect abortion, and it's a states' rights issue. I would not vote for any more pro-choice, so I would abstain from any voting in the future. I personally, in my life, have had 2 abortions. Women that I loved, I had abortions. Baby was in my interest. And so every day for the rest of my life, or every week, not a week goes by where I don't think about that I ended a life of a child of mine, because I am in the party of science. The Democrats are the party of science. Life begins at conception. And so therefore, anytime that a woman makes a decision, she's not only making it for herself, but she's making it for the living being inside of her. So we have to have national discussions to reduce these incidences. And as a Black American, there were less than 20 million Negroes in the country in the US Census in 1960. And since 1973, well over 20 million Black babies have been surgically aborted. This is genocide, and it's also choice. It depends on, I guess, your lens that you're looking at it. So therefore, I'm not here to take away what we already have, but I'm not here to add to it.
So just to be clear, Mr. Waters, and again, nail down your position. If there were any kind of abortion bills that Congress had to vote on, you just wouldn't show up that day, and you would not vote either way. You don't want to take a position on this politically?
I'm a man. I would show up, but I wouldn't take that vote because I'm not going to vote for more of it. And so
what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that I don't believe that we should have more access to late-term abortions. I don't believe that the state of Rhode Island, the people of the state of Rhode Island, should have been forced to pay for somebody else's abortion through medical insurance. These are the things I stand for, and I'll stand strong on that. This is a blue state, but it's also a Catholic state, and there's plenty of Latinos.
Okay.
That
Thank you, Mr. Waters. We're gonna move on to the next person, and
which would be Mr. Berbrick.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, I'll answer your question very clearly and succinctly. I'm pro-choice and will not compromise the very values and freedoms that I've spent my life's work defending. Because at the end of the day, it's not my body, it's not my choice. And government has no place telling a woman what she should do or shouldn't do with her body. And I can't tell you how many women that I've talked to over the last 3 months and before that, who have just shared their very personal stories with me. Many had late-term pregnancies that unfortunately, you know, the debate is always pro-life, pro-choice, but the life of a mother matters too. And, you know, so, and it's disturbing for the fact that my daughters and our daughters and granddaughters, right, have less rights than our mothers and grandmothers. And so this is a real personal issue for me. And, you know, women's reproductive rights are under attack like we've never seen before, you know, from right-wing, you know, extremists, whether we're talking governors, state legislators, Supreme Court justices, whether we're talking. And so, look, I will not stop until, you know, I will not stop to fight to make sure that we reverse or restore Roe v. Wade and reverse the troubling Dobbs decision, because the Dobbs decision, it's an attack on my daughter's rights, attack on my wife's rights, and it's an attack on the rights of every American, because it won't stop there unless we stand up now and fight for it and lay out a long-term process and strategy for doing that.
Thank you. Ms. Cano?
So I am the only one in this panel that not only is a woman, but have the track record of already casted very proud votes as a legislator to make sure that here in Rhode Island, we have the Reproductive Rights Act, which codify into state law the right to safe legal abortion. Also, as a born and raised Catholic, I have been very proud to make sure that I stand up as a legislator, because my beliefs should have never been interfered on the right for a woman to choose. And I'm the only one here that as a mother has faced fertility difficulties, and challenging pregnancy. And I had been able to share that experience as a legislator, and I was very, very proud to cast that vote, not only for me, but all the women that had been organizing to make sure that that was a win in Rhode Island. And I will continue with the same advocacy and proud stance at the federal level. No one here would have the opportunity to say that they have done that work already. And I'm proud that not only we passed that RPA, but we also passed the Equality in Abortion Coverage Act, which addresses financial barriers to reproductive health care and abortion by enabling Medicare coverage for abortion as a matter of racial and economic justice. So I've done that, I've been there, I will continue to do that with a strong voice, and I'm proud that my daughter gets to see her mother cast the votes for her future of reproductive health that is protected, at least in Rhode Island, and I cannot wait until I continue that fight at the federal level.
Thank you, Senator. I know I was a little bit tougher on you guys just to kind of keep things going and move along and really nail down your positions. Would anybody like to give the last word on this topic? I know Senator Cano.
Actually, Ryan, I have a really good follow-up. I just want to ask everyone a very brief one, because as you all know, the EACA was passed in Rhode Island and signed into law. To do something like that on the federal level would require the repealing of the Hyde Amendment. So I'm just going to go very quickly, like a simple, like shorter form answer. Ms. Cano, if elected to Congress, would you vote in favor of repealing the Hyde Amendment?
Absolutely. I already did that here. I will do it in federal government.
Got it. Mr. Berbrick?
Yes.
Mr. Carlson?
Yes, I absolutely would. But Sandra, I'm not sure you can have it both ways. You can't both take credit for what happened in this chamber in which you work, but also not take the blame for not getting the assault weapons thing done. So which one is it? Are you an influential leader there, or are you not?
Okay, Ms. Cano, go ahead.
It takes a legislator that work to build coalitions and to have done the work to understand that that takes time. And I have done the work, and I continue to do the work. Listen, I am proud of my leadership study to make sure that not only I advocate with passion for working families in Rhode Island, but I have stood and be the co-sponsor of this legislation since day one. So I'm never going to be like really flaky on these issues. I'm always going to go with my strong beliefs, because those are the democratic beliefs and values that I carry with pride, and I will continue to do that at the federal level.
Okay, Mr. Casey, the Hyde Amendment question, if elected to Congress, would you vote in favor of repealing that?
Well, we're talking about the ACA with in Rhode Island, and I did vote against that law because I do believe that the taxpayers should not have to pay for a taxpayer-funded abortion. And
so you'd vote against it on the federal level?
Yes, I would.
Okay, Mr. Waters.
If you don't mind, I just want
very brief, like 10 seconds, because
yes, Mr. Carlson attacked Sandra Cano and myself. There are 75 people up here in the House and 39 in the Senate. And to build consensus, it does take time. It's not like we can flip the switch and do these things. So I appreciate Sandra Cano in that respect. It does take a lot of work, and we've been here for a long time.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. Mr. Waters, if elected to Congress, how would you vote on the repealing of the Hyde Amendment?
I stand with Rep. Casey on this issue. So
you'd vote against it?
Yes.
Got it. Mr. Regunberg, last one for the Hyde Amendment, a vote to repeal it. How would you vote?
Repealing the Hyde Amendment is long overdue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Regunberg. Next up, we're going to go on to the economy. This one we're going to leave a little more open for him, because the economy can go into multiple directions as this conversation goes on. And regardless of political affiliation, voters tend to care about how much is in their wallets and these kitchen table issues. So starting off with Mr. Casey, as a congressperson, how would you contribute to the improvement of Rhode Island's economy?
Well, I think there are many issues that we need to address with the economy. We do have a housing issue. We have food insecurity. We have mental health issues in the state. But regarding the economy itself, I think we're moving, like most candidates will say, we're moving to a bluer economy. We need to have the federal legislation to help support that economy. We're talking about major offshore wind projects that are going to be happening that will hopefully bring some really good jobs here to Rhode Island. And also bring a little bit more income into the state, so that people can support our state. I think we need to look at a number of different a number of different avenues to increase the economy. I think we need to lower some of the business loan rates so that small businesses we can do a lot more startup. I think over the last 3 years, I don't know if everybody knows this, but we've got 155,000 small businesses in this state of Rhode Island that support our local economy. The majority of our state works in small businesses. Almost 80% of the folks that live in Rhode Island work in some form of small business. So we need to really bolster that community. We really need to help the small businesses survive, thrive, but we also need to help more in the startup of the industry as well. So I think we need to focus a little bit more federal influence as far as dollars for those type of loan programs. Whether we can, like I said, decrease the loan interest rates, because these are the people that are putting themselves on the line, trying to start their own business, and they're risking everything so that we can have a better economy here in Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. Mr. Regunberg, as a congressperson, how would you contribute to the improvement of Rhode Island's economy?
I think that the problem with our economy is that it is in so many ways rigged against regular people. The deck is stacked and folks are feeling it. Cost of living, I'm sure every candidate here is hearing this everywhere we go. I mean, my wife and I are feeling it with the cost of groceries and diapers and health insurance and our utilities going up and up. And that is not an accident. Corporate profits right now are at literal record highs. This is not something that's just happening. It is being done to us by corporate interests that are making more money than they ever have. And the way they're able to do that is that they have a stranglehold on Washington, and they're able to rig the rules in ways that benefit them and hurt regular working people. And there are things that we can do to stop that. We can pass laws to stop companies from price gouging. We can pass laws to put limits on prices of, particularly of needed, say, prescription drugs, including prescription drugs that our tax dollars went to develop, but then we gave an exclusive license to a big pharma company so that they could rack up the price 6,000%. There's measures like David Cicilline has been a real leader on around antitrust, around saying that we have to stop corporations from being able to consolidate and get so big that they can raise prices without having to worry about competition. But none of that is going to be possible until we're able to actually challenge and take on corporate power in Washington. And these are folks that are able to write the big campaign checks, that are able to hire the corporate lobbyists to roam the halls of power. That's why my campaign is very proud to not be taking a dime from corporate PACs or lobbyists. We need folks that are willing to take on those entrenched interests and fight for regular people. And that's why I'm in this race.
Thank you, Mr. Regunberg. Mr. Waters, same question. As a congressperson, how would you contribute to the improvement of Rhode Island's economy?
It is so sad that, Rhode Island is is the poorly mismanaged, misgoverned state in the United States of America. Because when you think of all the states that are kind of rock bottom, Alaska, the tundra, the Mississippi Delta, the bayous of Louisiana, we're only 40 by 50 miles of some of the best, beautiful real estate and in some of the greatest places. So our congressional delegation is part of the failure of Rhode Island. Our economics, we are just housing, it just goes on and on. It's a very ugly thing. So what we have to do is we have to have new leadership. We have to have new vision. One of the things that I did sign is I signed the Americans for Tax Reform, Taxpayer Protection Pledge, and I pledge to Rhode Islanders and to the people of this nation that I commit to not raising taxes, because as President Kennedy said, I'm a Kennedy Democrat, said, we keep our taxes low, and that helps to float all economic boats.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. Mr. Berbrick, same question. As a congressperson, how would you contribute to the improvement of Rhode Island's economy?
Thanks, Raymond. I would say the number one issue that I've heard from Rhode Islanders across our district, over the last 3 months and beyond is the economy, is the cost of everything, right? And so, lowering costs for hardworking families and small businesses is one of my top priorities. And look, we're not out of the woods yet. We are, our economy is at a fairly good place, but we need to keep an eye on a pending recession. And so for me in Congress, that's going to be one of my top priorities, is making sure that we don't fall into a recession. And inflation still remains a problem today. Look, I mean, my wife and I have worked 2 full-time jobs and 3 full-time jobs to help, put food on the table and to make our bills, because like so many Rhode Islanders today, right, it's becoming harder and harder to live for today, but also to save for tomorrow. And it's become even harder and harder, right, to get to the middle class and even stay there. I mean, the cost of housing, healthcare, college, childcare, right? The list goes on. And so many folks are feeling it. And, unlike some of my opponents, I'm not going to play politics with our economy. I'm not going to play politics with the lives of hardworking Rhode Island families, because, for example, raising the debt ceiling is the right thing to do. It's the necessary thing to do for Rhode Islanders and for small businesses. And when I get to Congress, number one, it's to tackle inflation, to create good paying union jobs for manufacturing, for infrastructure, and for transitioning to a clean energy economy. And why can't we here in Rhode Island be the world's leader, the country's leader in manufacturing wind turbines or clean energy products? And so that's a key piece. And, coming from a third generation family small business, removing red tape for small businesses, nearly 2/3 of Rhode Islanders are employed by small businesses. So many Rhode Islanders that I talk to, and they're small business owners, folks are looking for opportunities to create and grow their small business. The fact that, Rhode Island ranks 45th as a business friendly state. So look, there's so many issues that are plaguing the business community and has a big impact on growing our economy and transitioning to a green energy economy.
Thank you, Mr. Berbrick. Next up, Ms. Cano. As a congressperson, how would you contribute to the improvement of Rhode Island's economy?
So my family lived the really effects of inflation every single day. My constituents talk to me about that every single day. Look, I'm not afraid to fight for what is right. I know when we invest in our workers, we invest in our future. So I am going to be fighting for fair wages and dignity on the jobs at the federal level. That means that I know that it's not a secret that wages and benefits have failed to keep the pace with the skyrocketing cost of living. The backbone of our economy is made up of hardworking middle class and working families, and they deserve fair wages and dignity in the jobs, like I said. So we need economic policy to give workers and their families a fair shot, because when we know that they thrive, we all benefit. That is why I think that it is important that we have a minimum wage that is $15 an hour. We had already done some of the work here at the state level. I want that to be translated at the federal level. I have been the co-sponsor of that legislation. But I also would like to say that I want to center the efforts on labor issues, including also pay family leave, like we did here in Rhode Island at the federal level. As a mom, I know how important that was. Child care, like it was mentioned before, housing, food insecurity, and also making sure that we protect Social Security and Medicare, which is going to help a lot of our seniors that move our economy here. As a small business myself, when I was a small business, I understand firsthand that we also do need to support the backbone of our economy, which is the working middle families and a small business, just because like that, we create jobs that are healthy and that we are able to contribute to having that inflation cause low.
Thank you, Ms. Cano. Mr. Carlson, as a congressperson, how would you contribute to the improvement of Rhode Island's economy?
Oh boy, I wish we could spend the whole rest of the debate on this topic, because this is
only got 90 minutes.
The most important one they have. First of all, my history is that I'm a company builder. For the last 25 years, I've really devoted all of my time and talent and efforts to building companies. I've been the CEO of several companies, mostly small startup companies, and some big companies as well that I've worked in. And so I'm very familiar with what it takes to build a company and to grow a company, and what government can do to help companies to thrive and survive and not to suffer. When I was little in this state, the Navy was a big part of the economy. That was the economic engine that drove a lot of Rhode Island. We've lost that engine. And when we lost the Navy in 1974 and the years that followed, we bumped along the bottom for a long time. We've never rediscovered that core economic engine that can really power the economy of Rhode Island. And without that, there aren't jobs, and there aren't benefits, and there aren't overtime, and there aren't benefits for labor. So yes, we have to protect labor's interests. Absolutely. I was at the picket lines at UPS yesterday. I'll be at SEIU's picket lines this afternoon. Big fan of good jobs for union labor, and I'm completely in line with the unions on that. But we also need a powerful economic engine at the center of our state. We had a chance to do that with wind energy. It's possible that the news yesterday about the governor canceling the Revolution wind deal, that may have torpedoed that opportunity for Rhode Island to grab onto wind energy as the core of our economic engine. And a couple of my colleagues on the call have rightly pointed out that we rank 45th in business-friendly climate in this country. And that's just crazy. Rhode Island should be a leader, and we should be welcoming business and bringing business into this state. The only business we lead in right now, honestly, is scrap metal. We got to do better than that. And I'm a big fan of the idea of using renewable energy and platforms for renewable energy to really move us forward and to really restart the economic engine of Rhode Island. I built 20 renewable energy companies myself, sustainable businesses, and I think I know what we need to do to get those things going and how to partner effectively with the private sector to make that work.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. I think now it's time to go to the lightning round. These are Ryan and I's favorite questions. We're going to get through some topics quickly. I'll let you take it away, Ryan.
All right. Thank you, Raymond. Yeah, this is personally my favorite section. And we have 6 questions for you guys. We'll be following the same rotation. Try to keep your answers very brief. For the first one, we're starting with Mr. Regunberg. I'd like a dollar amount, please, for how much the federal minimum wage should be.
$7.25 is barbaric and obscene. We need at least 15. It probably needs to be higher than that with inflation that we've seen.
All right, thank you. Mr. Waters.
I support pretty much a free market economics, which includes labor.
Okay. Do you have a dollar amount?
For now, we'll just say $12 because most people make over $12 right now.
All right. Up next, Mr. Berbrick.
Yeah, I would say at least $15.
Okay. Ms. Cano?
I have said early, I support increasing the federal minimum wage to $15 and then linking it to inflation.
Gotcha. Yes, you were ahead of us on that one. Mr. Carlson?
I'm with Sandra on that. $15 as a baseline and index it to inflation, maybe go up over time.
Mr. Casey?
I think right now we need to be concerned about doing this on a state level. We need to consider economies of scale and the price of goods in certain.
So dollar amount should stay the same?
If you want to throw a dollar amount, I would say $12 would be reasonable right now. $7.25 is ridiculous.
All right, thank you. Up next, this one we will let you elaborate a little bit, so try to be about 15 to 20 seconds. I believe Mr. Regunberg alluded to it earlier, but the Supreme Court, I'm wondering what kinds of reforms, if any, do you support, starting with Mr. Waters? Examples can be term limits. Of course, you can say nothing, or something like more justices. So, Mr. Waters.
9 is fine. I'm all set.
None is fine. All right, great. Mr. Berbrick.
Sorry to get my mute off there. Yeah, look, I'm totally open to discussions of both term limits for our Supreme Court justices, but also expanding the number of justices that sit on the bench.
So you're open to anything, not really a.
Yeah, I'm open to the conversation. Any way to to encourage a more equitable, more fair justice.
Gotcha. All right, Ms. Cano.
So before we think about spending our justice, which I am in favor of, I think that we need to do a code of ethical standards and accountability to the current ones that we have right now, because it is important for me to start there. And so I support Senator Whitehouse and what he's been doing in that work.
So you're open to anything, not necessarily committed to one thing or another.
I would think that we should start with code of ethical standards and expansion of the justice after that.
Fair enough. Mr. Carlson.
I think the core problem is the lack of integrity in the Supreme Court and the long politicization of the Supreme Court, beginning with Bush versus Gore in 2000. When I was a young lawyer, we really revered the Supreme Court. So I'm in favor of things that make the court more democratically accountable and also restoring the integrity. So the code of ethics that Sandra talked about would be a baseline. And then anything that helps us to get to a place where we have faith in the Supreme Court being approved by a majority of Americans. The last 3 justices appointed by Trump.
Anything in particular that you support? Are you similar to?
It's lightning round.
Yeah, okay. Term limits are an okay solution, I think, or maybe even allowing each president to appoint 2 justices.
Thank you. Mr. Casey.
I think right now, I believe there should be an accountability, and there also should be, you can make some changes, but I'm open to any particular piece of debate on that.
Thank you. Mr. Regunberg.
We need to expand the court. We need to have an ethics code that binds them in the way it binds the district court judge that I just clerked for. We need to have require a supermajority of the court to overturn little d democratically passed legislation. And I think we need to file articles of impeachment against members of the court like Clarence Thomas that have showed that they are engaging in explicit corruption and bribery.
Thank you, Mr. Regunberg.
Next question, we're going to start with Mr. Berbrick. Are you in favor or opposed to congressional term limits? And if you are in favor, how many terms?
Yeah, I'm in favor of congressional term limits because
How many?
I believe each generation has the obligation to step up, answer the call, and pass the baton off to the next.
How many?
I would say, 12 years in the House and 12 years in the Senate.
Great. Ms. Cano, same question.
So as a city council, I voted for term limits, and so I have a platform that I already do the work
Okay.
on that. So I think term limits are healthy. I just think that
How many years?
it is important for us to have the people of Rhode Island also decide on what would they think it would be a good amount of years.
So what's your answer?
So every 2 years, the people of Rhode Island decides, but
That's
I
a
think
term length, though, Ms. Cano. In terms of term limits, so the governor can only do 2 4-year terms. Would you support a set limit on terms for a member of Congress? It sounds like you said yes as a city council person, but in how many for Congress?
for Congress, I do as well. I don't have years at the moment. So
Got it.
Okay. Mr. Carlson?
Yeah, I'm okay with term limits. I wouldn't go less than 12 years, though, for any office.
Do you have a specific number? 12 is
12
the
years.
number? Okay.
Yeah,
so
not
you
less
agree
than 12. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Casey?
Well, there's an election every 2 years, and I believe term limits can be determined by the voters.
Okay.
So
Again, Mr.
Thank
Casey, that's a term length. Term limits, governor can only do 2 terms. Do you support a set number of terms?
well, in the state, they have their own laws, but on federal level, no, I don't. I think the electorate can determine that.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I was just looking at my document. Up next, Mr. Regunberg.
I'm supportive. I'm open to a few different time schemes.
Okay. Any in particular you want to highlight quickly?
No.
Okay. Mr. Waters, same question.
Thank you. I signed the U.S. Term Limits Pledge. I support term limits in Congress.
How many years?
2 terms for senators. And although the pledge was 6 years for a rep, I believe it should be 10 years.
Gotcha. All right. Next question. This one is fill in the blank. We will start with Ms. Cano. The biggest thing holding back Rhode Island is blank. We're looking for a word or a phrase at most.
So right now, the biggest thing holding back Rhode Island is make sure that we have capital access to small businesses. So like that, we have more
Okay.
jobs.
Thank you. Mr. Carlson.
Is the biggest thing holding back Rhode Island is the willingness to think big and really be a leader in industry and really use government as a partner for the private sector to advance our economy.
Thank you. Up next, Mr. Casey.
The biggest thing holding back our country and the state is a political divide.
Okay. Mr. Regunberg.
The biggest thing holding back Rhode Island is corrupt insider politics.
Mr. Waters.
Bad politics and governance.
Mr. Berbrick.
Yeah, we just can't get out of our own way. I just think it's career politicians, political appointees, even selfish millionaires who put in place these systems that prevent true
Okay.
equitable
Thank you.
growth. for
Thank
all
you.
Rhode Island.
And 2 more. We are going to be starting with Mr. Carlson for this one. Do you support or oppose legalizing cannabis at the federal level?
I support legalizing cannabis at the federal level in order to do a better job of regulating its distribution and
Okay.
content.
Thank you. Mr. Casey.
Yes, I can support it, but I believe we need to have extreme specific guardrails regarding
Okay.
use, and I'm talking about use.
So
at
yes
work
with
and also-
regulations?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Gotcha.
Yes,
With
with-
regulations, yes.
Got it. Okay.
All right. Up next, Mr. Regunberg.
I support it, and we need to do it in ways that make up for the disproportionate impacts the war on drugs have had on communities of color.
Great. Mr. Waters.
Question again?
Do you support or oppose legalizing cannabis at the federal level?
I oppose it. We learned that teenagers are being harmed.
Okay. Mr. Berbrick, back to you. Same question.
Yeah, I support it. I've seen the positive impacts medicinal marijuana has had on our veterans and Rhode Islanders across our
Thank you.
district.
Ms. Cano, same question.
My voting record proves that I had already supported at the state, so I'll do the same thing at the federal level.
Great. And last one, this is a fun one. I ask it on my podcast. What is your favorite restaurant in the 1st Congressional District? And for this one, I believe we are starting with Mr. Casey.
That'd be Ciro's Tavern on Cherry in Woonsocket.
Great. Mr. Regunberg.
Nothing better than breakfast at the Modern Diner in Pawtucket.
Mr. Waters.
Hemingway's, old school.
Okay. Mr. Berbrick.
Look, I think I'd find my my personal belongings thrown out in the front yard if I don't say the surf club, because that's where my better half and love
Gotcha.
manages.
Thank you. Good answer. Excuse me, Ms. Cano.
As a Colombian American, very proud, I would recommend everyone to go to La Casona in Central Falls.
Okay. And Mr. Carlson.
We've had a lot of great family meals at Cello's. I want to go with that.
Gotcha.
Got
All right.
a lot of good recommendations for after this forum.
I know. And you guys knew what your favorite. Sometimes I ask people and they don't know. So you guys prepared for that one. I'm impressed.
So,
thank you for those answers.
Ryan, next is environment. We'll just stick with the base question because we are getting a bit pressed on time, and then we'll do
Yes.
quick ones for international.
Yes. Yeah. Let's try to keep these answers concise. I know people have time restraints, but it's good to get as much information as possible and continue this dialogue. So our next topic is the environment, and I'm going to ask another very broad question. What is contributing to climate change, and what do we do to solve it as a country? Starting with, oh my goodness, I believe
Mr. Regunberg.
Raymond, help me. Thank you.
No worries.
So the climate emergency is the existential threat of our time. We just had the hottest week that we have had on the planet in over 125,000 years. I've got a 2-year-old. I think a lot about the kind of world he's going to be growing up in. And right now we're on track for that to be a very scary and dangerous place. I'm very proud to be the only candidate in this campaign that's been endorsed by any climate and environmental organizations, from Climate Hawks Votes to Climate Action Rhode Island to the Jane Fonda Climate PAC. And that's because I've been doing this work of taking on the oil industry, taking on the fossil fuel industry to try to win real climate action. The problem and what we need to do is to take on the fossil fuel industry. They have a stranglehold on Washington, and they have no interest in allowing us to do the clean energy transition that we need to secure a livable future. But I've seen it's possible for folks to come together and take that on and win. I was a part of passing new clean energy programs here in Rhode Island, of blocking new fossil fuel infrastructure that would have made it impossible for us to meet our climate goals, and supporting litigation to hold companies like Exxon and Shell and Chevron accountable. And that's the kind of urgency that we need right now, because the decisions that we make in the next 5 and 10 years are going to decide human civilization for the next 10,000 years. And that's not hyperbole, that's physics.
Thank you, Mr. Regunberg. Next up is Mr. Waters. You're muted.
We have to have common sense solutions with what we call climate change. Climate change is a nebulous word. It's like a lot of other words that certain factions of the Democratic Party use. But I do believe if we're worried about global warming and we want to reduce the carbon in the atmosphere, we want to make sure that the cart is not before the horse. For instance, if we're going to use electricity more, we got to make sure that we can deliver the electricity safely. I think we should add nuclear to it. And in the meantime, while we're trying to add these less carbon energy producing things, we should not kill the economy. So we need to make sure that we have access to all the fossil fuels in America. We need to continue to be energy independent.
Thank you, Mr.
Great.
Waters. Mr. Berbrick.
Yeah, so I've spent my life's work, nearly 2 decades, spearheading climate change, real world solutions related to climate change, whether as an educator, as a scholar, as a diplomat at the State Department, as a policymaker down the Pentagon, leading the Department of the Navy's first Arctic strategy, pushing for real solutions and policies at the State Department during the chairmanship of the Arctic Council. And so I've seen the impacts of climate change firsthand, through my travels across the world, across the Arctic, and right here in Rhode Island. As Aaron mentioned, last week was the hottest week that we've had, 152-degree weather in the Middle East. And so, we in Congress, we have an obligation to answer the call and to push for bipartisan solutions. And I think there's a number of things that Congress can do today, right? They can push for, and things that I think Republicans will jump on board for, and that's ways to incentivize, how we capture and store carbon, advancing nuclear energy, meaning that we not only have to maintain our existing nuclear fleet, but we have to look towards the next generation of nuclear energy. We can improve energy efficiency through new energy efficiency standards. We can help maintain America's scientific edge. We can modernize our infrastructure. And at the end of the day, we're not in this fight alone, right? We're doing this in concert with our allies and partners. And we need to lead by example. We need to strengthen our international partnerships through regional mechanisms like the Arctic Council, but global mechanisms like the United Nations, as well as funding the Green Climate Fund, which is critical to help.
Thank you, Mr. Berbrick. Thank you, Mr. Berbrick. Ms. Cano?
So I do believe that we are in an urgent, critical time in where we need to really have policy that protects our earth and making sure that we have a place where we are allowed to have safe air and places for my kids to grow up where they have green open spaces that they could enjoy. Pollution is definitely a problem that we do have, as long as the topics that were discussed here with my colleagues. I think that tackle on the fossil fuel industry is priority. I have been a proud lead co-sponsor of the Act on Climate at the state, where we transition clean energy and new clean energy through policy, and just also protected with jobs in the green and blue economy. I think that we need to make sure that we continue doing that at the federal level, and the time is now. I want to make sure my kids have a planet where they could live and thrive. And then so the urgent matter cannot wait. The action needs to happen now.
Thank you, Ms. Cano. Mr. Carlson?
Sure. I think we all agree on the nature of the crisis, or at least most of us, with all due respect to Mr. Waters. So I think we all agree on the nature of the crisis. The problem is what we do about it, and we don't agree on how to solve the problem. Aaron wants to regulate his way out of it. He wants, I don't think we're going to get out of this by suing a bunch of oil companies. What we really need to do is to take the burden on ourselves to promote new businesses through technology that can create renewable energy and sustainable businesses. I'm really proud that I built companies that do saltwater refrigeration and electrostatic motors that can dramatically increase energy efficiency, and businesses that create renewable energy through wind and solar. And those are a positive contribution that creates jobs, creates new economic growth, and doesn't name a villain necessarily, but instead looks to the future and figures out what can we do to promote an advance on this. The Inflation Reduction Act passed by the administration, one of the most historic pieces of legislation in our lifetime, provides a tremendous amount of money for financial incentives for promoting renewable energy and the transition to a sustainable economy. I'm an expert in that field. I've been doing it for 25 years. That's how I can best help Rhode Island, is in leveraging that expertise to take as much of that money from the Inflation Reduction Act, funny name for an environmental pill, right? But that's what it is. And bring that money and channel it into Rhode Island and make us a leader in the world of renewable energy, really promoting Rhode Island as to lead that industry.
Mr. Carlson, can I stop you there?
Yeah.
Can I get a quick 10-second response from Mr. Regunberg and Mr. Waters based on what you said, starting with Mr. Regunberg? I know we're tight on time, but
we do have an enemy here. It's the industry that knew about climate change 60 years ago and lied about it. All they did with that information was use it to raise the level of their offshore oil rigs because they knew that the sea level was rising, and fund a climate deception and fraud campaign that stopped us from taking the kind of actions that would have allowed a slower, just market side approach like Doug was talking about.
Thank you.
We're not going to be able to do this unless we lower emissions, and the fossil fuel industry is going to do everything they can to keep oil and gas.
Thank you, Mr. Regunberg. We're very pressed on time. Mr. Waters, real brief, 10 to 15 seconds. Go.
I just want Mr. Carlson for Congress to know I also support hydrogen, and I think there's a future in that as far as vehicles as well as for energy, and that could be developed in a small state like ourselves.
Mr. Casey?
Yes, I think the transition to renewables is really crucial to all of us, but Rhode Island's readiness for the electric grid to actually handle this is an evolving concern. Ending fossil fuels is going to require real reliance on electricity in the power grid. and making a robust grid is as part of our dependence is going to be important. You know, as a congressman, I'll make sure that the federal government provides, is providing states with necessary resources to help and do that. But I think what we need to do is we need to be concerned on a national level as well. We want to become less dependent, but if we put mandates on businesses and mandates on the fossil fuel industry to stop production and do these things, we have to consider what's going to happen to the economy. We're going to leave our brothers and sisters out of work and out of jobs. We need to find a transition for that as well. We need a real plan to make sure that we're not affecting the economy in a specific way. The other thing I'm concerned about is national security on that level. If we come, currently our energy, and we need to look into nuclear, but currently our energy is produced by fossil fuel industry. So how do we make that transition? If somebody cuts us off and we don't want to use our own resources, which we have here in the United States, and we're going to rely on a foreign country for fossil fuels to create a power grid for ourselves. If we get cut off, then we don't have the energy that we need to maintain and to basically handle what we could be into a national conflict. And I think that's the most important thing. We need to look at this from a 10,000-foot view. I understand the concerns with the environment, but we need to consider the concerns on the economy. And
thank you, Mr. Casey.
Here in the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. We were very pressed on time, so I'm just going to do very, very brief, two quick ones, like a supporter opposed kind of deal for international. As some of you may know, today, Israel's President Isaac Herzog is scheduled to address a joint session of Congress, or it might have already happened based on the time we're taping this. We're taping this on the morning of Wednesday, July 19th. A few Democratic lawmakers are or already have, depending on when the speech happened, boycotted his speech. Very quickly, if we're going to start with you, Mr. Waters, if you were in Congress today, would you have stayed for that speech or joined the boycott?
I would stay for the speech. I support the state of Israel and its right to exist.
Thank you. Mr. Berbrick?
I'm sorry, you were cutting in. Can you repeat that?
No worries. So President of Israel, Isaac Herzog, addressed Congress today. Several Democratic lawmakers boycotted the speech. If you were in Congress today, would you have stayed for that speech or joined the boycott?
Well, I would have stayed for it.
Okay. Ms. Cano?
I would have stayed for it as well.
Mr. Carlson?
Proud to support Israel and happy to hear what President Herzog has to say.
Mr. Casey?
I would have stayed for it. It doesn't matter who's speaking. We have to listen to everybody.
Got it. Mr. Regunberg?
I would have stayed for it.
And then the last one, this is very brief as well, as some of you may know as well. The United States recently made the decision to provide Ukraine with cluster munitions, also known as cluster bombs. We're gonna stick with the same order. Mr. Waters, would you have supported or opposed that decision?
I would oppose the decision.
Mr. Berbrick?
I think it's a smart move, and I think we have to do more to provide F-35s as well.
Ms. Cano?
I would support it coming from a country that really provides, United States provides aid to. I know the effects on it, so I would support it for Ukraine as well. Yes.
Mr. Carlson?
I'm a big supporter of aid to Ukraine. My understanding that cluster bombs are forbidden by international law, so I would not support that particular move, but think we should continue to supply Ukraine with what it needs to defend their freedom and ours.
Got it. Mr. Casey?
I would support it. I think defending the freedom is important, but what I would like to do is get a matching for the cost. I'd like to find out what the cost is. I would like to get a matching federal funds back here to take care of people in our country.
And Mr. Regunberg?
We need to support Ukraine to the hilt against this brutal imperialist invasion, but cluster munitions don't have any role in modern society.
All right, and that's all the questions and follow-ups we're going to ask. We're going to do closing statements. Can you all believe that 90 minutes already went by? It feels like it's only been 10. Ryan, take it away with closing statements.
Yes, thank you, Raymond. I will give all of the candidates the chance to do a 60-second closing statement, and we can be a little bit liberal with the time because if folks have other things they need to tie up, we also didn't cover international as extensively. So for this, I know Mr. Regunberg is on a time constraint, so we will start with him. So go ahead. Last words.
Thanks again, Raymond and Ryan, for this great forum. Thanks to all my fellow candidates. This has been a really good conversation. We've talked about a lot of critical issues and a lot of challenges that we face right now. And I'm going to be honest, on a lot of these issues, frankly, I'm furious, right? I'm furious as the father of a 2-year-old that our climate is spiraling out of control. And I'm furious that we have this gun industry that is blocking any common sense violence prevention so that our kids can't feel safe at school. And I'm furious that so many working families are struggling right now while corporate profits are literally hitting record highs. But I'm also really hopeful. And that's fundamentally why I got in this race, because I believe and I know that when Rhode Islanders come together, we can take on those entrenched interests and we can win, because we've done it here in the past and we can do it in the future. We can take on big pharma and the health industry, pass Medicare for all to make sure that healthcare is a right for everyone, not a privilege for those who can pay for it. We can take on big oil and the fossil fuel industry to win a Green New Deal and secure a livable future for all of our kids. We can build an economy for everyone, not just the folks at the very top. But to do that work, I think we need leaders like David Cicilline, who can organize and bring people together and have a record of winning real progressive policy change. And that's the work that I've been doing here in Rhode Island for many years now. And it's the work that I would be so honored and privileged to be able to support and contribute to in Congress. So thanks again so much for having us in this forum. It's really great. It's been really great to be here. And I'm sorry that I have to run to get to a thing, but thanks again.
No worries. I'm glad you could be here to answer all the questions, and feel free to log off whenever you need to. Up next is Mr. Waters.
Thank you very much.
Statement and any last words.
Thank you very much. Again, this is Alan Waters for Congress. I consider myself a JFK Democrat. Therefore, I'm a moderate, and I think we need more moderate Democrats. But one of the things that I support as a K through 12 graduate of Providence Public Schools is that I would think the most racist thing in Rhode Island is education. And Malcolm X told us that without an education, we're not going anywhere in this world. And he also said that an educated man is a dangerous man. And sadly, too many of our children are inner cities, not getting the education that they deserve. So I support universal school choice. Let the money follow the child. Let no child be restricted to schools by their zip code. Those things are going to help broadly to rise and raise our society when more people can actually not only go to college, but actually compete in a college education. But also, I'm pro-union in terms of the right to collectively bargain, but we need students that can actually do the union work. And so there's a lot of work that we need to do in that area. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Up next, we have Mr. Berbrick.
Thanks, Ryan. Raymond, appreciate the opportunity. Look, I think the choice is clear. My opponents are focusing on using their political connections, using their insider connections to raise money, to solidify endorsements. And in all honesty, the most important endorsement for me is your vote on September 5th and before. And right now in this race, there are polls that suggest nearly half of Rhode Islanders don't know who they're voting for. And so folks are looking for someone who's different, someone who has demonstrated a lifelong commitment to serving our country and our communities, someone who can lower costs for hardworking families and small business, someone who has the record of defending our freedoms from extremism, protecting a woman's right to choose, and protecting our kids and communities, and protecting our planet. And I'll do this the only way I know how, is by listening and learning from you, by being honest and fighting hard for each day, whether or not you voted for me or not. And so I think, clearly, as you can see on the virtual stage today, I'm not the typical mold of your candidate, of a typical candidate. And so I'd be honored to earn your vote on September 5th, and I look forward to the discussion, Raymond.
All right, up next, we have Ms. Cano.
Thank you, Raymond and Ryan, for having us. This forum has been great. I'm going to start by saying that it has been the blessing of my life to come to the United States and live in a country that has provided me and my family everything that I have. Through public service is the way that I am able to say thank you to the country. And that's why I'm so committed to continue making the difference for Rhode Islanders, just like I have done at different levels of government, starting from the school committee to the city council to the state senate. I'm running for Congress because I care deeply about helping people. I will always, like I said before, carry the voices of my community and advocate on behalf of working people. I'm a fierce advocate for gun safety because I have witnessed gun violence. I defend public education because it has allowed me to pursue the American dream. And I fight for reproductive freedom because I know that women should make their own decisions about their bodies. I also have worked on immigration because I had been through the process myself. And also, I'm a champion for racial justice and cultural inclusivity because I live under the cloud of bias every single day. I fight for environmental justice in the face of climate crisis because it threats every day the aspects of our lives. And I worry for the world that my children will inherit. And lastly, I would say that I think that is an opportunity for us to make history because the diversity of our state is our strength. And we have a very diverse Congressional District 1 with different residents for backgrounds. And I think we need to reflect that diversity on the person that we represent in Congress. So I hope that you support me in the next election, which is going to be September 5th. I hope you consider me. And I know that I will continue with my passion advocating for every resident of Congressional District 1, just like I have done in my level of public sector advocacy already. I also have a lot of very good, strong background on finance and small business support. And I really think that all of that with the building coalitions that I have already obtained is what's going to make our next congressperson successful in Washington, D.C. And I hope you give me the opportunity to be your congresswoman. Thank you and have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Up next is Mr. Carlson.
First of all, really appreciate having this forum today. This is by far the most significant and substantive and meaningful conversation we've had among the candidates. So we owe you a debt, Ryan and Raymond. Thank you very much for this. And look, there are fights that are really worth having. One fight is to take on Trump and the MAGA Republicans and fight back for reproductive freedom, for gun safety, for safer communities and schools, and to protect our children, and to fight for inclusivity. As a member of a minority community myself, I really feel that that's a really important thing, and I'm proud to follow in the shoes of David Cicilline as being a proud gay man representing Rhode Island. So I think that it is important, Sandra's right, to have diversity in our delegation. That's a really important idea. At the same time, we can't just have villains, because honestly, when they divide us by choosing these hot button issues and trying to provoke social unrest through these hot button issues, when they divide us, they win. The minority party, which is the Republicans, win when the Democrats are divided. So what we really need to do is to find things that we can come together around and finally act like the majority party we are, to get things done that we really want to do. The problems that we face are real, whether there's climate change or education issues or affordable housing, or all of those are really important issues. Gun safety, reproductive rights, they're real issues, but the solutions are fairly clear. We know what we need to do to solve most of those problems. We're just not coming together to do it. So in addition to putting Trump and his MAGA Republicans in the dustbin of history, we also need to end the era of division and this polarization that has ripped our country apart for so long. When I talk to people around the 1st District, they breathe a sigh of relief, and you see their faces relax when we talk about, we don't have to live this way. We can put this era of division behind us for good, and we can move forward as proud and grateful Americans, grateful for all that this country offers us, as Sandra said, and we can move forward united to solutions. That's what I'm all about. And I think a lot of those solutions are partnerships between the government and the private sector. And that's a really important point. Right now, our government in Rhode Island is not equipped and not capable of working effectively with the private sector. We see that with the failure of Tidewater Landing. We see that with the collapse of the Cranston Armory deal.
Mr. Carlson, I know I said I wasn't going to time you, but can you maybe like
I'll wrap it up.
Seconds? Thank you.
We see it with the governor's decision yesterday to torpedo the emerging wind industry. What Rhode Island needs to do is to step up and be a leader in those proactive solutions to the problems that are out there that we know how to fix.
Thank you. And last but not least, Mr. Casey.
Thank you very much, and thank you guys for putting on this forum. Like everyone else, I really appreciate it. It's great to have the opportunity for the people of Rhode Island to really understand us on many different levels at many different times. As a candidate, I deeply respect our constitutional rights, and I understand the importance of protecting them. I'm committed to making decisions that don't impose unnecessary financial burdens on our families and our businesses. I believe in creating an environment that fosters economic growth and encourages innovation, job creation, economic stability, all while maintaining the strong values and principles of our society. I firmly believe my talent for fostering unity among people distinguishes me as an exceptional candidate. I've done that in the House of Representatives, and it is indeed uncommon for a union firefighter to get the backing of the business community as well. I think my consistent dedication to bridging gaps is what sets me apart from all of the other candidates in this election, and my talent for fostering unity among people distinguish me as well. I'm pretty confident that my values resonate with the majority of the people of Rhode Island. I'm committed to faithfully representing and upholding these principles. And I recognize the importance of listening to the concerns and challenges faced by the constituents, ensuring their voices are heard and their issues are addressed in the decisions that I make. I think by working collaboratively, we can forge a better future for all. I'm committed to working tirelessly to uphold the values which we all share. I believe I'm an exceptional candidate for many reasons, but first and foremost, I've achieved some remarkable distinctions, both being an Eagle Scout and a Freemason. Throughout history, there's only been one president that's done the same. And as such, the tenets of these organizations are based on service to community, mutual respect for others, meeting people on the level, no matter what their station in life. And I feel that, being a rescue officer with the city of Woonsocket, I've been in the homes of people in Rhode Island figuratively. I understand how people live. I understand how people struggle. I think that brings an important piece of knowledge into how we need to help people across our state. And again, I'm asking people for their vote on September 5th. I think it's very important for us to get out there and express ourselves, no matter who you vote for. But thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all. Raymond?
That is the end of the first of two sessions for this CD1 virtual forum. Thank you to everyone for tuning in when you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it on Brian's podcast. And thank you to all the candidates for participating in this session of the forum. Our next session will feature the remaining candidates. For those watching and or listening, please stick around. We'll be back shortly for session 2.